Welcome to an all-new episode of Get Lit with Lianna, the podcast. Join me as I sit down with a new guest author in each episode to discuss their books, careers, and everything in between. Today's episode is very exciting because I have my first ever repeat guest, my very good friend, Pons. You may know him as Books Over Bros on bookstagram, is coming back to talk to me about his brand new book, You and I Rewritten, which is available everywhere today. A few months ago, Chip came on the pod. We talked about what it was like to be creators. He was writing this book. It wasn't finished really at the time. I had read a really early copy, but the book is finally out. And I told Chip he would come back when it was ready so we could do a deep dive. And that's exactly what we're doing today. This is a long one, but it's a good one. If you've read this book, you're going to die for this episode. We get into everything. So here we go. Without further ado, my conversation with my very good friend, debut romance author, Chip Pons, starts right now. Welcome, my bestie. Chip Pons, debut freaking romance author, is back on the pod. My first ever repeat guest. Honestly, it's only fitting that you're my first repeat guest because you're my favorite person. So it should be you.
It feels very natural. I'm very, very happy about it.
I'm so happy you're here. A few months ago when you first came on the pod, we said you would come back when your book is out so we could have a full in-depth conversation. We can just, forego spoilers. Those don't exist. We're going to talk about everything. So I'm so happy that we finally get to do this. And now the book has been out. By the time this is live, the book will have been out for a week.
That's so exciting.
Isn't that so mental?
It's very mental.
I'm so excited. But the first copy that I read of the book was pretty much the same, except there were small little tweaks and stuff that I definitely picked up on. So when I got to read this final version, it just came together in so many ways that I didn't even realize it needed to come together in. So I'm very excited to have this deep convo with you about this book. But before we get into it, how are you feeling about this release? Just tell me your initial emotions being a first time author. Where are we at mentally? Recording right now, we're how many days away are we? A week away? A week and a half away?
2 weeks away.
2 weeks away. Okay.
Yeah. 2 weeks from yesterday.
Okay. So how are we?
Feeling a little overwhelmed, to be honest. But I think that's to be expected. Nervous and embarrassed is not the right word, but it's almost secondhand embarrassment that people are going to read certain parts and either associate me with them or I don't know. But I'm just very excited. I'm very, very thankful for everyone who's helped throughout this entire process, yourself included, and just really looking forward to connecting with readers and hearing what they have to say, good and bad.
Oh my God. Well, I'm sure the reception will be great. I mean, it's already been so far, it's already been so positive and you've received so much love on this book and everyone's been so generous and excited. So it's only going to go up from here. But for those of you that are listening that don't know, if I were you, I would honestly pause this episode, go buy this book, read it, and then come back. And also listen to our first podcast if you want to get to know Chip a bit more and how we know each other. But for right now, we're going to get into You and I Rewritten, deep, deep, deep. So before we start, because last time we weren't able to talk about the goddamn plot. We literally were not allowed to speak anything because it was still so hush hush. So give me
anything.
I know. Nothing. Yeah. You had the title out. I think that was literally it. So I'm sure this is the first of many times you will have to be doing this, but give me the elevator pitch of You and I Rewritten.
Ooh, okay. So the book starts when you meet Will Cohen, who is a new junior editor at Austin Publishing House in New York City. He ends up moving in with his oldest and dearest friend, Claire Thompson, who helped him get the job. And on his first day, he runs into Graham Austin, who is the son of the publishing empire. And he's not his boss, but he's definitely not his peer. So there's this weird, I want to please this man, but then I also don't know why he's got a stick up his ass. And when their paths meet, they just kind of spiral down into this awesome and beautiful and quick romance. And the rest is history.
So crazy. But what really is interesting to me about this book is that it's obviously a romance, but so much of the story is like bigger than Will and Graham's relationship.
Yeah.
There's so much in this story. When you were writing it, when you first started writing it, did you know, like, okay, it's obviously going to be a romance in the sense that we're really going to focus on the relationship, but another massive chunk of the story is not going to be focused on Will and Graham?
Yeah, that was, I mean, truthfully, since I've been talking about this book, the thing that I keep saying is like, it's like more than a romance. It's not just, it's not just a happily ever after. Like, yeah, there's romantic elements, but like the whole point of the book is the last third, and so you have this beautiful relationship with Will and Graham, who I love. And that's just really building the foundation to kind of get you to the last third of the book and to kind of help you survive that, because you need that love, you need that warm feeling, and it's the foundation that you need to kind of get through the ending of the book. And that was my intention the entire time, is to introduce you to this moment in people's lives and, watch them fall in love and watch them kind of experience an incredible high of like meeting your person. And then what happens when life gets in the way, or when life happens, not even gets in the way, because it happened and they were there for each other. So
yeah, it's like the most real form of a romance book I feel like I've read in a really long time, because it's not just like boy meets boy, they fall in love, they go on dates, they get into a fight, they break up, they get back together, the end, like it's very much an honest reflection of like life and how relationships work. And exactly what you said, like life happens. It's not necessarily that things come up and things get in the way, but obviously life throws you curveballs, and it's how you adapt and how you lean on one another. And I think it's so beautiful that that's the main focus of the story, rather than it just being like boy meet boy, they fall in love.
Yeah, I'm glad that you like that. I know it's not going to be for everyone. I know we talk about the romance formula all the time.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that my husband and I talk about in the LGBT community is that, we have an opportunity to kind of redefine what normal is. And so I kind of took that approach to writing this love story, because it is a gay love story with two gay men, and what works for every relationship doesn't work for all. And I wanted to just write a romance that's centered around two guys who fall in love.
Yeah. No, I love it so much. So the first time Will and Graham meet, this like meet cute, if you will, it's kind of the opposite of a meet cute, because it's like doesn't go over so well, Yeah. Why did you want to start their relationship off on this like rocky waters, if you will?
Yeah. So I've been very vocal about this book on Instagram and like promoting it. And it's very much inspired by my relationship and meeting my husband for the first time. We met together in the Air Force, working together as coworkers. And my husband was very notorious for having like kind of these stern, like eyebrow raised moments during staff meetings where he would like kind of just look at you and be like, no, and like move on. And just because he's very amazing at his job and just like very mindful of people's time and his leaders' time and like no nonsense. And so when I wanted their initial moment to kind of be like the records, scratches, like time stands still, like, wait, what just happened? Like those were some of the moments that I was trying to emulate.
I'm dying. Were you in meetings like that together?
Oh, yeah.
But did you know each other? Like, is that how you two met? Was it that kind of circumstance?
Not exact, no.
Oh, okay.
When we met, he was actually an instructor of mine.
I'm dying.
So he had his like instructor pants on and was like no nonsense. And so
but I love that you put some of like Graham's like down to businessness comes from your husband.
And it's definitely not I definitely didn't want to do like an enemies to lovers situation. I didn't want there to be unnecessary conflict or rudeness or cruelty. But for you to understand Graham, is you need to understand that he's someone who pours every ounce of who he is into his job. And so he's got blinders on and laser-like focus on getting the job done, and everything else is extra.
Right. We need to talk about Will as
Sure.
the protagonist of the story. Will to me was like such an interesting character because he's obviously like riddled with anxiety, right? Like he's very upfront about it in his inner monologue. You hear it from him. He's always like repeating that mantra. He's very much aware of his anxiety and how he needs to deal with it. But what's interesting to me is that at times he comes off like timid and shy and unsure. And at other times he's like very fierce and very direct and knows what he wants. The same way that like he goes after Graham in that parking lot after their initial awkward meeting and being like, hey, let's go for a drink. Like to me, those would be two completely different personalities. And the fact that you blend them so seamlessly into one human was so well done. Like, why did you choose to do that? Why did you try to like, they almost contrast each other in one person, which is so cool.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be like that initially. When I originally wrote out Will's character, it was more like clunky charming and more confident than he was. But then I started writing him, and I feel like my natural like insecurities and like anxiety started coming out as I was writing. And I was like, you know what? He's just going to be this little nervous Nelly. And but at the same time, people are so multifaceted, and I feel like it gave him the opportunity to like be someone that you didn't think he could be, or
Yeah.
like show that he has other sides to him. And while he struggles with mental health and while he struggles with anxiety, that doesn't mean that he's not he's not sexual, or he's not charming,
Right.
or enticing, or confident in certain moments of his life. Because like me, for example, there are lots of things that make me feel insecure and anxious and uncomfortable to do in public or to talk about. But then there's other things that it's like no big deal. I can do whatever, whenever.
Right.
So I really wanted Will to not be one thing, and remind people that like we can be a bunch of things at once, and that just because we suffer with one thing doesn't mean that defines our whole personality.
100%. We're going to get into the mental health of it all because that obviously plays a humongous part of this story. But what's cool to me reading it is that when you read romance books, and I know we keep saying like this isn't a typical romance book, it doesn't follow the formula, whatever, however we want to say it. Like typically when you read a romance book, like the protagonist or the hero, whatever you want to call them, like they have one set of personality and like they just very much stick to it. And again, this book, further than the plot, its characters just feel so normal and real, like real people, because you see all these different sides of them at the same time. So when you're reading, it's almost like it trips you up because it's like, wait, I thought that they were supposed to be like nerdy and anxious. How are they being so like sexual and like upfront, you know? And it's like, oh wait, but they're like a regular person. And that's how regular people are. But you sometimes forget that when you're reading a book because it's like fantasy fake. So I love that like you really feel that they're human in this book, you know?
That makes me happy.
Let's get into the Claire and Will of it all, because I know Claire is based on like one of your best friends. And I just die every time she like comments, real Claire comments on your Instagrams. Cause I'm like, oh my God, am I living in You and I Rewritten right now? Like, is that what this is? I'm obsessed with their friendship. Obviously, your friendship with real Claire inspired like the Will and Claire's relationship in the book. But what parts of your friendship did you really want to make sure were like in there, like just innately in their relationship?
Just so Will and Claire have known each other since childhood, and Claire and I, my Claire and I have not, which is unfortunate, but I feel like we have. And so for me, when I thought of like the girlfriends in my life, or the friends in general in my life who I wanted to model this character after, there was no one else that fit. Like there was no one else I could think of that would be as good of a friend as Claire is to me. And so I really wanted to show the unconditional support while also like roasting you and calling you out on your BS. Right. And, you know, I have a lot of people in my life who I love and who are there for me. But if I needed something, I know I could pick up the phone right now, no matter what. And Claire would tell me my feelings are valid. She would tell me that she's there for me. And then she would also tell me when I'm wrong and like, let me know, like, you're kind of acting weird, or, or you know, like it's the type of friendship that's honest and like unconditional and vulnerable and transparent when it needs to be, but then like, no matter what, that person has your back.
Right. And that's exactly what Claire is for Will in this book. She's
Yeah.
also like the best source of comedic relief, like at the best times. And I just like honestly want to like bottle her up and put her in my pocket. Like everyone needs like a Claire in their pocket, like a little hype woman. She's just so in all the right moments, she's just there and so like pivotal to the plot, obviously, but just like so important to Will's character.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about both real Claire and fictional Claire. But no matter like without skipping any beat, like Claire in my life always has like just little one-liners that always make me like double over in laughter. And she can go from serious to funny to warm to like everything in the span of minutes. And she's truly unlike anyone I've ever met in my entire life.
Nice.
Yeah, I love
so
her.
Nice to have a friend like that. So nice. So let's get into like some of the thicker stuff in this book. We're going to get to the romance part because that's obviously my favorite part, knowing who I am. But like before we get into that, I need to just get into the thick meatness of this book. So you don't shy away from tough topics. It touches on a million different things, but at the very beginning and kind of the introduction to Graham is when Claire tells Will about a situation she was in where she was emotionally abused by a boyfriend. And Graham kind of swoops in and defends her and kind of helps her get out of a yucky situation. Why was it important? And that storyline is like mentioned briefly and then it's moved on from. Like, why was that important for you to include? And like, what do you think it kind of contributed to Will and Claire's relationship, Will and Graham's relationship, Claire and Graham's relationship? Like, it really helped set a foundation for all of the relationships in the book.
Yeah. For me, it was important for Will to have someone that he trusted saying like, hey, I know what you're seeing maybe one way, but like there's more to the story than maybe you're seeing or feeling.
In terms of how he viewed Graham.
And like, I think, so I'll bring back to like my relationship. When I met my husband, it was very much like, steer clear of him. Like he may not be the nicest person. And there was like one or two people that were like, no, they're like, give him a chance because X, Y, and Z, right? And so I really wanted Will to have this perception of Graham based on a few interactions where it's kind of like that weird office tension, but then having his most trusted person be like, hold on, like there's more to the story. This is my experience with him. And like, don't just write someone off because of a few interactions. Graham and Claire's relationship was something that was really important to me because I wanted them to be peers and colleagues and a support system when there became a romantic thing between Will and Graham. It's important that Graham also had someone that he could go to for work and for bouncing ideas up where he's not like always tasking the guy he's sleeping with, right? So, yeah, that was just really important for me to kind of introduce Graham's character of doing the right thing when a lot of people wouldn't intervene and just kind of speak to who he is as a man.
And I think it also says a lot about Claire and Claire's character also, and how like strong-willed and determined and hard-headed she is, and like knowing her worth and seeing a relationship that was obviously not serving her and being able to like walk away from it. And obviously she needed some assurance, but in the end of the day, she was able to walk away from it.
Yeah, Claire was the most important character for me, truly, to write. And even though she's like a supporting character and it really is about Will and Graham, I mean it when I say everything I did with Claire, I did so intentionally because I never wanted the female character to come across as weak or as anything other than the amazing human being that I had of her in my head. And I went back and forth on that whole scenario with like, the introduction with the ex and the situation. And even though it was roughly or very briefly mentioned, I really did that on purpose because I wanted her to like have I know my value and I know my worth. And while Graham was there to help me, he didn't solve the problem for me. He just was there for me in the moment.
Yeah. So Will very openly struggles with anxiety. He has a panic attack in the book. He's very conscious of his anxiety. It's something that him and Graham talk about and they really level with one another with. Why was it so important for you to make that such a pivotal part of Will's personality, his anxiety? Because it's such a huge part of him.
Yeah.
And then not in like a shameful way and just like this is another part of him, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, it took a very long time to not view stuff with my mental health as a bad thing. I'm very emotional. I'm ruled by my emotions. I feel like, and it's never like anger or like that. It's always like sadness and just feeling anxious and unworthy and all of those negative things. And I've always been so frustrated with myself that that's a part of me and that's a thing that I'm plagued with. And it's a negative thing. And it's something that like I hated about myself for so long. And it really took a long time and I still struggle with it, right? Like we all do, but it took a long time for me to realize that some of the ways that I struggle are also strengths. I feel like I'm very empathetic toward others and I feel deeply when people are feeling happy and when they're sad and when they're, stressed and concerned. Like I feel all of those things and I feel like I can relate to a lot of people in those ways. So I really wanted Will to like kind of acknowledge that he has this, but not like make an excuse for it or not like hide from it or not feel shame for it. Because at the end of the day, we've all got things that are going on in our heads and in our hearts that we can't control. And it's who we are and who we are is worthy. And I just wanted him to kind of be this realistic version of someone who has accepted their mental health.
It's just very honest. That's honestly honest. Honestly, how it comes off is just very authentic. And you can tell that it's like from your voice and from your heart as somebody who's dealt with different aspects of anxiety. It's just the way it translates on the page, at least, is it comes off very real and very like relatable on so many different levels.
I mean, we've talked about this and I'm glad that you can say that. And, I want people to know that this is my experience with mental health and I don't speak on behalf of everyone who suffers with anxiety. And I know that it comes in all different shapes and forms, and some are less severe and more severe than others. But I tried to paint a representation of what I've experienced and what I've seen other people in my close, immediate life experience.
A turning point in the book is the gala, when Graham and Will are at their work benefit gala situation and Will gets drunk and Graham, swoops him in. He's like, let's go sit over here where it's quiet. And they basically have this like very open heart to heart about anxiety. And Graham just like calls Will's anxiety for what it is head on and just like acknowledges it and validates it and doesn't like sugarcoat it, doesn't make Will feel uncomfortable about it, kind of just like normalizes it and levels with him. This is like a turning point, obviously, in the story. Why was that important for you to create in their bond early on?
One of my previous jobs was working with wounded service members, and my boss, who I adore more than anything, my former boss, one of her biggest things was these veterans, you don't know what they've been through and you cannot relate to what they've gone through. And so it's important for us to meet them where they are and not try to force them to be where we want them to be. And that sort of mentality of meeting someone where they are with their mental health and their struggles with whatever they're going through in life was really important for me to try to get Graham to show Will right away that it wasn't a place of judgment, that it was a safe space for him, and that while they are new to each other, Graham embodied that safe space and that he was at least willing to show, like, you can talk to me and there's no judgment, there's no consequences. Like, I see you, I understand you, and everything you're feeling is valid.
I feel like also it's important to note, like, this is obviously a gay romance, right? It's two men. And like the fact that both of them were so vulnerable, and we don't often see men as vulnerable people in books.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter really that it's a gay romance book, but especially in a circumstance like this, to see two men who are very vulnerable and very much open with how they're feeling and honest about their insecurities and their anxieties, it's very, very different. Was that like an intentional thing that you thought of when you were writing this book? Like, beyond just wanting to shed light on mental health, also within this specific genre of books, something that maybe is a bit different or not really shown so often?
Yeah, I absolutely didn't want to do anything stereotypical. I don't like stereotypes. I don't like things that you'd expect them to be. And kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier about being more than just one thing, like for me, Graham is kind of this like masculine, movie, fruity, handsome drink of water. But I also didn't want him to be this like emotionally guarded, like not in touch with his emotions person. So it was important for me to like, yeah, he may not let everyone in right away, but when he does, it's like, I'm going to tell you how I'm feeling and when I'm feeling it. And it's going to be a conversation because we are adults and we are grown and we, don't need to hide from our feelings or suppress them because that's unhealthy.
Point blank, it's unhealthy.
And I didn't want to waste time. Like there was pieces of the story that I wanted to get to faster. And I did not want to waste time suppressing feelings within my characters when it comes to anger, frustration, lust, whatever. Like if you're feeling it, let's talk about it or let's do it.
I love it. And I feel like that's what makes it so different from so many other books, is that there's just like not unnecessary conflict. Like there's none of this miscommunication stuff. Like they just say what's on their heart at the time that they're feeling it, like without consequence.
Yeah.
So we kind of just like broached the topic of like Graham and Will, things are getting, more intense now. Like they're kind of building the bridge. So I feel like now we can talk about Claire's birthday. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Claire's birthday is like probably one of my most favorite scenes in the book. And when I was rereading it this time, I literally texted you. I was like, Claire's birthday with a million of like the hot face emojis with the sweat coming down. Like, here we go. The scene in which Will is dancing and Graham sees him from like across the bar, and then and then there we go, Mr. Wall treatment. That's how the Mr. Wall treatment comes to be. Yeah. Is one of the most like intensely steamy non-contact scenes I've read like ever.
Oh, yay.
So steamy. And it's obviously like a serious like sexual turning point in their relationship. How did you come up with the idea? Like when you were writing it, were you like freaking out, like furiously typing, or was it like choreography, having to think about where's moving what? Like tell me about the writing process of this like steamy, intense scene.
So the steamy scenes are definitely the hardest ones to write. Just like any sort of sexual chemistry, like that was the biggest challenge for me. Okay. For this scene specifically, I put on some fun like house music. Like
stop. You gave yourself a club at home.
I definitely did. I wanted to like get into I hate dancing. Like that is just not my thing.
Seriously?
I'm the 6'3" white guy who like sways in the background and like does like a little clap, like zero coordination. And so it was fun for me to kind of put myself into the body of someone who's maybe a little more comfortable in their body and can move with rhythm. And so, I wanted it to be this like fun, like boozy, kind of like fluid moment where Claire and you get to meet Dean, her love interest, and they're kind of, tipsy and making out on the dance floor. And like, I keep doing like this type of motion, but like, it's
that's what it is.
It's almost like an ocean, right? Like it's like an ebb and flow. And so the idea of dancing, going clubbing and not really knowing who's touching you and having this like moment of like sexual power.
100%.
Right?
Yes.
I wanted Will to have that. I wanted him to feel desirable and not care who's behind him or who's touching him, and it not even be about that person. And then have that be the moment where he's like really fantasizing about Graham, and it's like Graham's eyes that he's thinking about, and Graham's body, and Graham's hands on him, and then oh wait, I feel Graham looking at me, and there he is across the bar, like watching this with his arms crossed and all muscular and bulgy.
It's so good. It's like one of those scenes that is written and choreographed so well that like I can watch it in my head perfectly like a movie. Perfectly, you know? But one of the like best parts of this scene that I could like see so perfectly is like the famous Mr. Wall treatment scene that Claire coins in the book. And it's honestly the most epic nomenclature for a movement I've ever in my life read. Like I can't even tell everybody that's watching, listening, like what Mr. Wall treatment is, how you thought of the name, like how you came up with this entire, like the movement of it all. Like just, it's just so epic. And it's like such a part of their story.
Yeah. So once Will sees Graham, he like makes his way to him like a little lost, lovesick puppy in a trance, only to be led out of the club and kind of in an alley. I didn't want to make it like dark and scary, but definitely he rounds the corner and kind of chest bumps into Graham, who's there. And yeah, the whole like I wanted it to be this like, I love tension, but I also don't have the patience for like prolonged tension. And so I'm a big fan of instant gratification.
I love that.
Makes me a horrible human being, but like, don't make me wait for it. So I knew that I didn't want this to be their first kiss or like anything super intimate like that, but I definitely wanted it to be a tease. And so, you know, the whole Mr. Wall treatment thing comes from them being very close against one another, and then Graham kind of positioning Will against the wall and basically like dry humping him into oblivion, and like breathing along the side.
I can't even.
Yeah. And so honestly, I think it was The Bachelorette inspired
are you gonna tell me Emily and Ari's kiss in?
No, I think it was Sean Lowe's.
Oh, Sean Lowe, because Emily and Ari had a kiss like that also in like Bulgaria, I feel, or something like that.
It was definitely one of those, and she said "Gene Jammin'," and that was like my favorite thing of all time. And so when I was thinking of this scene, I was picturing both of these like dudes that are hard in jeans jamming against each other. And yeah, so I was thinking about like a funny thing that Claire could say afterwards, and Mr. Wall treatment was just there.
No, it's hilarious. And I love how she like teases him about it. Like, oh, Mr. Wall treatment. Like, it's so good. Yeah. But now that we're talking about the scene, I know we said I didn't want to get into there yet, but like, I feel like we just need to get into it. So you clearly, you just said it, like, you don't like to wait. Like, you're a very instant gratification kind of person, which is very obvious because it's like first kiss, they bang. Like we just get right into her. We don't wait around.
Yeah.
As somebody who arguably could read just as much romance, if not more romance than me, we've read our fair share of sex scenes, whether they're open or closed or what have you. What was it like to now like flip the script and be the person writing the sex scenes? Because obviously you listen to my podcast. I know you're like, you hear what other authors say and how they're like, it's not sexy. Like it's all choreography, making sure the right parts touch the right parts and the hand moves there. But like, as a romance obsessed reader, like, was it what you thought it was going to be? Like, tell me the whole lowdown.
Yeah. I mean, I said earlier that these kind of scenes were definitely the hardest to write just because it was not like normal dialogue or descriptions, you know? But I thought it was sexy. I had a great time writing it. And like, I felt like I was watching porn all day when I was writing these scenes because I was like, just picturing two dudes having sex.
I'm dying.
Sorry if that's
I love that
for this podcast.
No, what we don't censor here. Come on.
For me, it was important to show versatile gay men where one is not clearly the top and one is not clearly the bottom, because I hate when authors or like shows or whatever strategically portray one character and you just automatically assume, you automatically know they're going to bottom. There's 3 sex scenes in the book, and
There's only 3?
yeah, it feels like
Why
there's
did it?
more, right?
Yeah, because it's so intense. Like it's because of the tension. It feels like there's more. I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, there's only 3 actual sex scenes,
Okay.
and each one is
I didn't
different.
even.
I didn't want to go into like details about like sex ed and, you know, descriptions of putting on condoms or like
All right.
preventative measures. Like that's very unsexy to me. And while it's very important, I understand the importance of that.
Mm-hmm.
I also felt like these were grown men who take care of themselves, who don't need to like invite the reader into this
Right. Like as
conversation.
explicit as the book is going to be, it doesn't need to be that explicit. Like,
Right. There
yeah,
are
I
some
hear you.
things that are just like assumed in
Right. I
my
love
mind.
that. I
Yeah.
love that. Well, the
Uh,
steam is truly unmatched, but like reading it was, or sorry, writing it, was that like at all awkward for you? Like what were the edits like when you had to edit it? Was it hard when your editor edited the book? Did she ever have notes about the sex scene and does that make you uncomfortable? Like tell me
no,
about that. Okay.
honestly, those scenes I feel like didn't get edited too much.
Okay. Chip, look
And
at you. You know what you're doing.
I know. Truly though, my husband was the greatest resource for these kind of things because I would ask him to close his eyes and I would read it. Does this make sense? If I were to put my hand like behind your neck or, you know, touch your arm here or do
Yeah.
this, what would your natural movement be after that? And like,
Oh my
it was
God.
almost like we were acting it out.
Choreography.
Yeah, without doing the sex, you know, having the sex, but uh, it was just nice to
That's
have
wild. Yeah, that's so
that
good.
in-house person who could be like my mannequin and like, yeah, it was great.
I love that. I actually have never heard an author like say point blank. I'm sure people do it, but nobody's admitted to me. Yeah, I tried it out and it worked.
Sure did.
I love that so
Yeah,
much. No, but they're just written so, so well and they're so steamy and like it's just the perfect like amount of like give and take and the emotional intimacy matches the sexual intimacy in every way, which just makes it even like so much better.
that was more like the steam was important to me, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted it to complement the emotional intimacy and
Mm-hmm.
it made sense. So
Mm-hmm. It does. It does. And on all 3 of the scenes, even though like in my head, I feel like you're wrong and there's more than 3, they are perfect. They're so on par with one another. There's another scene in the book where we kind of get into like the chunk of the story that you mentioned before, like the last third. But basically there's this family dinner where Will brings Graham home to meet his family and we kind of get a better understanding of his family background. And during this scene, we learn more about Will's parents and his biological father. Things kind of like start to fall into place at this point for a reader once you like learn about Will's upbringing in terms of his relationship with his biological father and his relationship with his dad. Why did you want to make that clear distinction early on, like about how Will views his father versus how he views his biological father?
that's just another one of those moments that's like from my life.
Mm-hmm.
My parents got divorced when I was very, very young, and my mom remarried, and my stepfather is my dad, and
Mm-hmm.
I've always called him dad, and he's the man who raised me, and it was important for me, you know, I look at the book as a love story, but it's really about fathers and sons. And the 3 relationships that Will has with his dad, his biological father, and then Graham's father was
Mm-hmm.
very important for me to show those 3 relationships because those are very prominent in my life. My
Mm-hmm.
dad, my father, and my father-in-law are 3 very different men and how they show love and how they were there or weren't there for me. And so I really wanted I really wanted Will to be adamant about that distinction between like, no, he's my biological father, but this is my dad.
It's really important. And especially you understand once you get into this part of the book, you kind of understand the sense of like abandonment that Will felt at such a young age and how it fundamentally manifested itself into so much of his anxieties and the reason why he feels unworthy in his job, unworthy in a relationship, so uncertain in himself at so many different parts of his life. Why was that important for you to kind of make that connection for the reader? Like, where did that idea of having that abandonment at such a young age from his biological father play such an important part of him as an adult and trying to have adult relationships and move on, like have the agency to move on as an adult in his life?
Yeah, I was just trying to I was just trying to plant the seeds of like, this is a part of a reason. It's not an excuse, but it's kind of oh, okay, that makes sense kind of moment of why he is the way that he is and why someone like Graham, who is very sure of himself and very confident and very like one direction, like one way of thinking, maybe challenges that insecurity and makes him feel less than unintentionally because he's comparing himself to maybe someone who he views as unattainable or someone who he views as better than him. And it really, it's not about Graham at all. It has everything to do with Will and how he was raised to kind of feel.
It's also really interesting, the literary technique you chose in order to tell Will's past. It's kind of in forms of like nightmares, flashbacks. Like, why did you want to show those like dark, like really upsetting, I'm trying to find like the proper word, but like the like they were critical in Will's upbringing and then like in how he formed as an adult. So why did you want to show those moments in forms of like a nightmare and in a flashback, like the way instead of Will just point blank being like, okay, let me give you the lowdown about my dad, it was kind of that he woke up from a nightmare and then felt compelled to share it?
It was one of those things where Will and Graham never talked about it, like throughout the entire story. And it's one of those, this is something that Will bottles up and he doesn't share with everyone, and as open and emotional as he is, that's not something that he wants to talk about. And I felt like a dream was kind of a great way to kind of give the reader that background information without forcing Will to talk about it to Graham, maybe when he wasn't ready. There's no doubt in my mind that like they have had this conversation, but I just didn't want to write about it because I didn't feel like at that time they were at a place where Will would feel comfortable to share that with him. It was interesting and challenging for me. I wrote it in 3 little vignettes and I tried to age Will's narration differently in each one. So like the first one, he was obviously very young and the sentences were shorter and choppier and like talked about mommy, you know, and like the second one, you can tell he's a little bit older and has a bit more understanding of what's going on. And then the last one, he's a teenager and obviously very much aware of the reality of his life.
And it's also another thing that's kind of interesting is that Graham also has gone through a different type of familial hardship, but he has gone through stuff as everyone has, and he chooses at that moment to refrain from kind of leveling with Graham or with Will, where at other times he has chosen to level with him and be like, okay, well, you have this and I have this, so we're kind of on the same ground. Why would that intentional and like holding that piece of him back for now?
You know, and that is a good point. He could have opened up then. I'd like to think that in that moment, Graham didn't want to do anything other than support him and not make it about himself. And I think, like Will, Graham is just very selective with when and how he chooses to open up. I don't necessarily think he was hiding anything from him. I think he was just being more intentional about when he has that conversation. And that was Will's moment to kind of just need Will or need Graham and need just a little bit of support instead of a conversation.
Right. Okay, fair. So let's touch upon Graham's deep secret, if you will, or something that the baggage he's been carrying that he's afraid to share. He has a brother who is a struggling alcoholic. And we find this out after his mom shows up at the office and tells him about this benefit that she's throwing. And he kind of just last minute tells Will, like, do you want to come? And Will's like, Yeah, of course I'll come. So why was it important for you to include that storyline in to build Graham's character? Obviously, it does so much. That one little part does so much because you understand Graham so much more once he peels back those layers and kind of unpacks the trauma that he harbors for having to endure that. So why was that an important aspect of his character you wanted to add?
I wanted to write Graham that way because I wanted to show that like the actions of family impacts everyone around them differently. And Graham growing up with his older brother being the way that he was, felt like he had to be the perfect one and he could not step a toe out of line. And he was already in himself like self-loathing because he was the gay one and he had this secret and this thing that he thought would make him unlovable and unworthy of like his family's love and their acceptance.
Right.
And so he just like was the person who was perfect and he couldn't step a toe out of line. And I really wanted to show what that would do to a young gay man and make him kind of sink into himself a little bit. And like it would make those moments of him letting loose be more fun and like be more genuine and spontaneous because you know that's not a natural tendency of his. And so yeah, with his brother, I knew that Graham needed something that like he couldn't be this like perfect fictional boyfriend who had no troubles in the world.
Yeah.
And I just felt like it would force their connection to be more of one of understanding if it came from an addict's perspective, where Graham's brother and Will's father kind of struggled with the same but different things. And there's a level of understanding between Graham's family and Will and Graham's family. So I just wanted to have that tie.
Speaking of Graham's family, I love and I know we kind of talked about it, or rather you kind of talked about it, but I love the relationship that Will has with Mitch, Graham's dad. And it's they come in fleeting moments. It's not like it's like a big sucker punch, storyline, but it's the love is definitely there and the respect is definitely there. And I particularly love the scene where Mitch kind of says, like, I forget what words he uses or what words you made him use, but basically that like Graham is like really smitten by Will, like he really likes him. That scene in particular like gave me full body goosebumps because it's just that like validation, like regardless of what type of relationship you're in, like you always want the validation of the people that love your person the most, like you just want them to love you too. And having like that conversation between the two of them, it just made their relationship feel so much more like real and like that it was going to last the long haul, So was that emotional for you to write? Like, it's not even that it's an emotional scene, but like the sentiment behind it, like makes me emotional.
Yeah. For me, I mean, fathers are like my soft spot. And I love my father-in-law more than anything. He is an incredible man and an incredible father. And so, yeah, I mean, I wanted to capture that moment of a man who loves his son so much and has such a special relationship like my father-in-law and his son have. And Mitch was just such a beautiful character to like just weave into the moments. And I just picture him as this man who kind of like bops into the office every once in a while just to like bring some sunshine and laugh and leaves, but he's definitely one of my favorite characters.
Me too. One of my faves. One part of the book that is honestly a major part of the book that we have not yet brought up. And I kind of was doing this strategically because I feel like this needs to be like the end chunk of this conversation. Will works in a publishing house, and very early on in the book, he gets a manuscript that crosses his desk by this woman named Lianna. And it's this story that immediately resonates with him. And he's just like, I need to publish this book. I need to work with this author. Like, I need to get this book out there. This is the book that's going to speak to millions of people. It's going to resonate with people of all different walks of life. Everybody will find something in it that they need. It's just like, he's so compelled to tell this story. And his relationship with Lianna is kind of rocky. Like she stands him up one time, then she ends up coming home with him for dinner. And then she's kind of back and forth, wishy-washy. But at the end of the book, or not even the end of the book, how far into the book? 70% way of the book?
Yeah, ish. It's like the third act.
It's the third act. Will and Graham are at home and Will gets a call, and the call is from a hospital, and the hospital is basically saying your father's in the hospital, you're next of kin, you need to come and make a decision. And Will's confused because he's like, what do you mean my mom would have called me? Where's my mom? Thinking that it's his dad, not his biological father. And we basically learn that it's his actual biological father that's in a medical crisis. And Will teeters on whether or not he should go. And it's ultimately Graham that says to him, kind of plays devil's advocate, for lack of a better word, and kind of paints the bigger picture and just says, like, you're seeing it from one perspective. I need to just offer you this other perspective so that you have a clear head and you make the most like sound decision for you. Why was it important for you to have Graham be the voice of reason in that situation and kind of like be the mirror for Will to make such an important decision in his life?
Because so I talked about this book being very personal, and this portion of the book is like 100% from my life. And so I wanted Graham to be the partner and the person that like I didn't have in that moment. I was alone. And when I got that phone call, I dismissed it and I hesitated and I didn't go, and I waited and waited and waited, and then I finally went. But I wonder, I wrote Will in a way that like was always my what if moment. Like or I wrote Graham into that story of like, what if I did go? What if I had someone that was urging me to go at the time that I did? Would things have been differently? So I definitely wanted Graham to be good in a crisis, to know what to say because of the experiences that he's had with his family, and to offer, like you said, a different perspective for Will that he may not be thinking of in the heat of the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
It's such a heavy scene. And I feel like the reason why it's so heavy is because it's so obviously like personal. The way it's written, it's just like, it's too real for it to not have happened, kind of almost when you're reading it, which is devastating.
Yeah.
But knowing that this is like actually something that you went through with your biological father passing away, like, how were you able to write this? Like, I can't imagine, like, did it feel cathartic in any way? Do you feel like it helped you like acknowledge what happened and move on? Like, I know you've carried this with you. Was like, I need to know about like the healing process. Like, do you find that writing this has benefited you?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, it was hard. Like I don't think I've ever been that like raw and vulnerable with any, like I've talked about it, I'm very open, but like just writing it verbatim, it was just very hard. It was a scene that I kept putting off, and I didn't want to write it. I had no desire to write it, even though that was the first scene that I fully had like outlined in my head. I just kept putting it off. And when I finally like forced myself to do it, it took days. Like I would write like a sentence or a couple words here and there, and I just couldn't make it fit right. And I was crying probably the entire time I was doing it, and it was just not a good experience. But reading it back and editing it and kind of having that moment of like, I wrote it, I closed my computer, I walked away, like I got a hug from my husband, and it's everything's okay. I was telling you, I just read the book to my husband from start to finish, and reading it out loud to him, like in this like intimate experience, that was the cathartic moment for me, just because I was like crying while reading it, but I was with him and we had a candle lit, and it was like a cute moment. But it was hard, I'm not gonna lie. It's one of those things where a death of a parent stays with you for life, you know, and no matter what your relationship was. I had a terrible relationship with my father, and it was one that I always wanted more of. And we weren't speaking when he died. We were not on speaking terms for months. And I got the phone call and I didn't go. And when I did go, it was too late and he was gone. And I wanted Will to have that moment of guilt because I've had it for the last 10 years. And
Mhm.
so Will doesn't go and he doesn't get there in time. And he experiences the death of his father through the doorstep, and it's too late. And there's nothing
Mhm.
he can do. And he can never take that moment back. It's a permanent decision that he made. And while it wasn't necessarily done maliciously, it was done selfishly. And
Mhm. And it's also like normally when you're reading a book, like especially like a romance book,
yeah,
like in a picture perfect world, you would figure like, well, like of course Will would go and he'd have this big hash out screaming session and then they would reconcile and then maybe he would die, but at least then Will gets this closure. But like real life, sometimes you don't get closure.
yeah.
And I feel like that's just this like through line of this book is like, this is real life. And like, it's just life's going to do what life's going to do. And like, it's how you react to what life throws at you, not how you like avoid what life throws at you.
It would have been too easy for me to have him live and for them to have that conversation. And
Yeah.
I don't say that to be like insulting to anyone else who's written a
Mm-hmm.
story like that. But for this story, that would have been the easy solution. And that would have
Mm-hmm.
been what's expected.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to write my actual experience and show that, like, while Will hates his dad, there's a lot of hate there. He is going to feel guilt
Mm-hmm.
for not showing up when he wanted to, like when he should have, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
not because of his dad, because of him. Like he
Right.
robbed himself of that moment.
And it's also this weird like thought also of like the notion of like showing up and how like Will's father did not show up for Will at any point in his life. And then there was one opportunity for Will to show up for him and he chooses not to or takes too long to, like it's that kind of dichotomy also, which is really, really interesting. I don't know if you've considered it like that, but for me, like the thought of showing up and what showing up means, I feel like at the end, the way Will honors his father is way more of an important valued way of like showing up. And that kind of brings me to my next thought and this kind of closure that Will does get. In the end, we find out that the manuscript that he'd been working on with Lana after she has said, I can't pursue this working relationship with you. I don't want to publish this book. He finds out that the book was actually not written by Lana, but it was written by his father. The twist of all twists. But it's such an insane, like, jaw on the floor moment that like I truly did not see coming. And I'm sure most readers will agree. Like in my head, I was just the first time I read this book, at least I was just like, okay, so he loses this big work opportunity and then he just to look himself in the mirror and realize like you win some, you lose some, it is what it is. And I just thought it was like a personal thing, like a growth thing for him that he was gonna have to realize like not everything's gonna go your way and you'll overcome it. I didn't think that it was gonna come back in the way it did. And then you realize like, oh, this is literally a series of letters, stories, whatever, of Scott explaining himself almost.
Mhm.
So how did you come up with this like twisty idea? Was this, I don't think this part was drawn from real life, was it?
No,
Right.
no.
Okay. But tell me about this twisty part.
I knew that I wanted to incorporate my experience with my dad
Mm-hmm.
in the story. Like that was very important to me. That hospital scene, the finality of it, the not receiving closure, the guilt, the book aspect. I had a lot of amazing conversations with friends as I was like hashing this out. And one of my girlfriends, Katie, we were kind of just going back and forth about what that would look like in the publishing world. And this kind of just, it came to be during like a friend brainstorming session. And it evolved along the way and it kind of took a life of its own, when he found out, if he found out, how it came to land in his lap. And so it just really became this fun other character that is
Mm-hmm.
like vaguely talked about. I felt like the move and the right path was to kind of make it feel like it's just in the peripherals over here, and that's you're getting to experience Will and Graham, and oh yeah, he's working on a book, and
That's how it comes off.
he
Totally.
really
Yeah.
likes it. But Will and Graham and his shirtless body, and oh, the conference table, um, but I wanted it to be this like moment that after the reveal and after it's known that Will's father, Scott, has been working via email with him, that maybe you kind of look back at it differently, like, oh, they're having like these random, hey, PS conversations where they're like kind of having small talk or like getting to know one another. And while Will and Lana get to work together and meet and like do their things, he's actually communicating this entire time with his father. And I felt like there was many different ways that you could do that, and you could show it more, and you could show the back and forth. But I kind of wanted it to be left up to your imagination, and you get like the little taste of what that's like.
Yeah.
With the letter at the end, and so yeah.
And then at the very end of the book, again, how Will kind of honors his father's memory and how he kind of overcomes this in the epilogue is 2 books are published. Tell me about both of those books and why you wanted to include both of those and the charity element included, because I love that part.
So the once Scott passes away, Will wants nothing to do with the book. He's kind of done, and like, this was all a lie. I'm embarrassed. And he's grieving and dealing with his stuff. Graham and Claire and Mitch convince him otherwise. And so Claire takes over and continues editing the final product of Scott's book, gets it ready for print, and it's good to go. Between her and Graham, they get it together. And photography is mentioned here and there within the book. Like, that's one of Will's passions, and they have this cute little Polaroid camera moment together in bed. And I wanted there to be an emphasis on invisible wounds within the veteran community, because it's so important to me. While I don't suffer the same way that certain service members do, I know so many people, and I've worked with so many incredible veterans who struggle every single day with the invisible wounds that they're dealing with. PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, that's all like very near and dear to my heart. And I want to make sure that everything that I do speaks to that. And so I was trying to think of a fun way to incorporate that. And I was like, well, what if Will kind of takes a sabbatical and like finds not really, but like finds a passion project to pour all of his grief into. To back up a little bit with the book, once he realizes that it's written by his father, he gets the letter, and it kind of explains about Scott's PTSD and how he, was receiving care and blah, 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 blah. So I think Will gets ignited to kind of chase this passion and to kind of connect all these dots with these wounded service members. And he ends up curating this beautiful coffee table book that shows portraits of service members who suffer from invisible wounds. And so Claire, in her over-the-top perfect fashion, plans this beautiful book launch / gallery evening where they've surprised Will with like giant portraits that he's worked with these veterans all around the room. And then in the toast at the end, Mitch announces that all of the proceeds from these books are going to support wounded veterans.
It's such a nice way to end.
Yeah, it's very, like, it ties it up with a bow, and it's probably not realistic, but
it definitely does not feel unrealistic by any stretch. It's just like a beautiful ending, and it's a wonderful way to like memorialize somebody that was maybe not the best person, but in the end kind of did mean well.
Yeah, and I think truly it's barely about Scott, right? And, for Will, he may be grieving his father, but I think his eyes were opened to the bigger picture, to what was really going on. And while he doesn't necessarily forgive, and while he's definitely not going to forget, I think having that understanding and that like human to human grace where you're kind of messed up, but there's a reason behind that. And it's not an excuse, but like you've experienced some stuff and you didn't get the help that you needed. And so I think having his eyes open to that really showed him the bigger picture of like,
For
this is
sure.
beyond my situation. And there's so many families across the world who are dealing with the things that our service members deal with.
Yeah, that's so true. I didn't really look at it from that lens, but that's so, yeah, that's so true. Um, okay, well, those are all my questions about the book. Did we do a deep dive or did we do a deep dive?
It was a deep dive.
Before we go, I need to know two things. First thing is you tease a lot in this book about like Lana and Scott's like story. Like, are we getting more of this?
Kind of. I'm not sure yet.
Okay, fair. Fair. That's fair. We could leave it at
I,
that.
I haven't decided what I want to do
We're
with
non-committal. Okay.
yet.
Okay, fair. Follow-up question. I know this because I get to hold some secrets here, but could we discuss at all like what you're working on? Like you have a work in progress. Everybody that follows you on Instagram knows it by its acronym. But like how far are we in this process? Are we feeling hopeful? Do we think we may continue with the self-pub route? Like what do we think?
Yeah. This one I'm probably like over a third of the way done.
Okay.
I just started in June, so I haven't been writing that long. And truthfully, when I do write, I write like very small chunks. It's taking forever and it's very frustrating because the first book was so personal and I had so much to draw off of. This one is completely different. It's not a sequel, it's new characters, it's completely made up. So yeah, it's taking forever and I'm so frustrated by it. But I'm very pleased with my self-publishing journey. Like it's been so much fun. I love having all of the control and doing everything by myself and kind of being the decider for certain things. But I think I'm going to try like for You and I Rewritten, I didn't give querying agents my all. Like I sent out 10, I put my feelers out there, I got some great feedback, and then I kind of just made up my mind. Nope, this is what I'm doing. But with this one, the story just feels different. I love it so much. And I know that like every writer is supposed to love what they're working on. But okay, well, I'm just very excited for people to read this story just because I'm having fun writing it. And it's a lot lighter. It's more of a romantic comedy. It's definitely including some of the tropes that I really like. And I will say there's a lot of fake dating and forced proximity. So I'm very excited for that.
Love.
Yeah. So we'll see.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm so excited for you. There's some like other very cute moments of notice, and I don't want to end this on a sad, somber note because there are very cute, happy moments in this book that I'm really obsessed with that I couldn't figure out how to ask you them in a question. So I just wanted to like talk about them and like what the inspo was behind writing them because I'm obsessed.
Okay.
So let's start with the sticky notes.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about the sticky notes at all, but in the beginning of their relationship and then kind of throughout the relationship, Will and Graham leave sticky notes for one another as like little mini love letters.
Yeah.
Tell me about the inspo behind that. Like, is this something you and Alex did? Like, it's just so cute and romantic. And it's just like the little things,
Yeah, that's that was like my favorite moment from the beginning of my marriage and like our relationship when we first started dating. When we worked together, our office, like our desks were diagonal from one another.
Okay.
So we were sitting back to back, probably with like 7 to 10 feet between us.
Okay.
And there were days where, so sometimes we would go into the office fully dressed in our uniforms, or there are some days where we would work out after work. And so we would leave our uniforms at the office and like come to work the next day in gym clothes and then like get dressed in the office or like, like do our business. And so it became this little game of cat and mouse of who could get into the office first and sneak little sticky notes into our uniform pockets.
That's so cute.
I have all of them. Like
you do?
Oh yeah. I have a box full of little sticky notes that I probably have one in here. No. Well, like we still leave little notes and little things here and there. And
that's so cute.
It was just so fun. Like when one of us would have a work meeting or like a
Mm-hmm.
lunch or something to come back to your desk and like start to work, and then like you see it in the corner of your eye, or like
Mm-hmm.
you feel it in your pants pocket or something random. It was just fun. It became a game for us.
The big date night, which is a huge pivotal part of the story. I just couldn't come up with a question that correlated, but like we need to acknowledge how stunning of a date this man planned out with the freaking jellyfish and
Oh
the
yeah.
picnic. Like, where did that come from? It's so random. Like, jellyfish is so random.
The jellyfish, we took a trip when I,
Everything about this book is based on your real life.
yeah, oh, yeah. It
I
makes it
love,
easier that way.
I
No,
love.
we took a trip when Alex introduced me to his family for the first time. We drove from New Mexico to Los Angeles, and we went to the Long Beach Aquarium, and
Okay.
we spent hours like looking at the jellyfish. And I brought my work camera, and I have these beautiful pictures that I took of these jellyfish with their long tentacles. And every chance we get, we go to an aquarium and just like check out the jellyfish exhibits because they're so cool.
I'm dying. That's
Yeah.
really
And
cute.
so I was trying to think of like Will as a photographer, what
Yeah.
would capture his eye in a moment that would like take his breath away. And jellyfish just popped into my head, and I thought it would be so cute to like have this little spread and surprise. And
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay, so the jellyfish are actually less random. To me, who didn't know this backstory, I was like, I would have never thought of jellyfish, but now I
Yeah.
understand. I love
Yeah.
and the last little fun tidbit I wanted to bring up is the fact that Graham is bilingual.
Yes.
Because we didn't talk about Camila and like his mom and the fact that his mom is like, please tell me. First of all, did Alex help you write all the Spanish parts, or are you a little bit bilang also now?
I'm definitely not bilingual at
Okay.
all.
Okay.
Um, the, the Spanish is all from my husband.
Okay.
His family speaks Spanish. They are very much a Spanish family.
Okay.
And so that was important for me. I didn't want, I mean, I was writing a true to my life relationship. So it
Mhm.
was
A
me.
fundamental part of your
Yeah.
person. Yeah.
And so I chose to make Graham's father white, not Spanish.
Hmm.
I don't know why I did that, but it just made sense to me for it to be like a mixed family.
Okay.
And but I really wanted to have the Spanish be a part of who Graham is and who his mom is, because some of my husband's favorite memories are with his mom and his grandma cooking and doing all of these things. And so I wanted to show that relationship and have the Spanish be a part of who he is. It's not a
Hmm.
party trick. It's not something that, he whips out. I mean, he does whip it out when he needs it, but it's like not. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just
It's
who
a
he.
fundamental part of him. Yeah.
Yeah. And like for me, my inside joke with my in-laws, because they always tease me like, why haven't you learned Spanish yet? And I'm the like only child who took French in high school in the entire United States.
You would do well over here in Quebec, let me tell you.
Probably I don't remember anything.
Oh, never
But
mind then.
our inside joke is "Donde está la biblioteca?" which is where's the library. And so I put that in the book for my family. And
Yeah.
like anytime they ask me, why aren't you learning Spanish? And I just whip that out like, oh, ¿dónde está la biblioteca? Like that's my response for everything. Um,
That's so cute.
so yeah, I definitely had my husband look over all of the Spanish and make sure that that was all right. And
Love.
yeah.
Okay, then the other thing I really wanted to talk about briefly, but like I need to talk about it, is game night and then the karaoke night that follows, because like that pour some sugar on me scene is honestly ingrained in my brain forever. And along with like Mr. Well treatment, those are two scenes that like I can watch literally in my head as if they were a movie. Why did you choose that song?
Honestly, I just wanted something that was like sexual, but then
Okay.
also like rocker vibe, that
Love.
it would just be a song without like writing the actual lyrics, where I could be kind of vague that
Mhm.
you would know what song is playing and you can hear it while you're
100%.
yeah
100%. It's iconic. And also like I loved seeing Graham like let loose like that. Like he was
yeah
so like apprehensive
I
and like
know,
rigid at the beginning, but then she was just like, fuck it, you know?
like ripping his shirt
Yeah,
open,
it's so
sliding
iconic.
stage. I love it.
Can you explain to me the title? What was the raison d'être behind the title?
Yeah, I wanted the title to be kind of dual meaning. So I wanted you to think that it's about Will and Graham, but technically it's actually about Will and his father. Will is able to kind of rewrite how he views his father and what the relationship was. And I really wanted that to kind of speak to both relationships. And it could be about Will and Graham, but it's really about Will and his father.
I love that.
I'm actually getting Rewritten tattooed on my wrist. I'm really
In this
excited.
font?
No, I'm probably just going to do like super small, like type font.
Just Rewritten?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. A little reminder.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, well, everybody who's listening to this obviously has read this book and I'm sure have loved it the way I've loved it. I hope that this conversation gave them a little more understanding of the reasoning behind these characters, the story. This was so much fun. I love you. Thank you for coming back and doing this with me and deep diving and talking about all the things that I know you don't love talking about, but it's in your books and I have to. And like,
thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.